It's all to do with envisaging an alternative to the present system, which is an extractive economy, which is driving us literally towards extinction because we're depleting the very life web of life which we are part of and we depend on. But in the cities, that can be quite obscured from us. People relying on employment and jobs and buying their food, and it's not easy to make that connection, either for those that are middle class and moderately successful and not suffering too much, or the poor who are right at the bottom of the pile who are severely exploited by this system of working for a wage. And for the middle class category, it's going to need a deeper connection with nature and an understanding, a caring about nature to spark a change, a realization that our lifestyle is depending on destruction, and to care enough about that to want to change. And what inspires me to know it can happen is just one really shining example. Lucas, who came here as a volunteer to Kuladama from Brazil, lived in Sao Paulo in a huge city, and one day he just felt, I can't eat a hamburger again. He became vegetarian because it felt to him like when he is eating a hamburger, he's eating the rainforest, because he is aware of the massive clearing of the Amazon in order to plant pastures to produce beef for hamburgers, and it came home to him in that way. And I was just impressed at how did someone in a city make that connection, but he did. So that connection is available even in the heart of the city. He then traveled around the world, started visiting places where people are trying to live in harmony and looking for a different way of life. Spent a few months here with us. And he was in Morocco the next I heard. He just really gets around. But he's looking for that alternative because he's seen the damage. And that's not common, unfortunately. And that's, I think, why this crisis and the lockdown is an opportunity for people to start thinking and seeing that this is not working. Because we do know that these kind of pandemic diseases and jumping from species to species only happen with a massive breakdown in ecosystems, which is a result, of monoculture and industrialization and overstressing of the natural world. So it's an opportunity for people to stop and think. So that's where the lockdown has been an amazing opportunity. And the social response to that has been very inspiring for people. People in that class are helping. My daughter's involved in Muizenberg, and it's just really exciting to see. And she's really excited just to see how people are coming together and helping and caring for that other class of people that's in the city that have left. They really, Bill Mollison described them as rural refugees, and that's really what they are. We've collapsed life in the countryside by making them dependent, on this cash economy and a very deliberate breaking down, of their viable way of growing and producing their own food. It's been a deliberate attempt to make them dependent on the wage, on a wage, in order to support industrialization, and people can make money out of their labor. But they really are the ones that are suffering the most. And to them, the lockdown is a different kind of wake up, not so much to realize that the life that they're living is destructive, but the life that they're living there in the city is much more vulnerable than it was when they were at home, especially if they know people at home. And there are some people in those rural areas that are still fully productive. They're rare now, but they do exist. So they now become their inspiration to know that you actually could be better off at home. And the lockdown has really brought that home very forcefully. When you can't have that daily wage, you are desperate. They are now reliable on the help and the handouts and the food parcels and that sort of thing. And no one really wants to be in that position. So it becomes more attractive to move back to the rural areas and produce food for them. So it's different where you're sitting on the spectrum, how your response can be to this need for change. But even someone in that first group, just the first step is realizing that it's damaging. And another step that people were already taking before the lockdown, who really cared about their health and looking at nutrition, and have woken up. That this food that we buy just doesn't give us what our bodies need to be healthy. It must sort of, in some way, keep us going. But we very much like these mass-produced animals that are kept alive artificially. Our bodies aren't keeping us alive, and our food isn't nurturing us in a way that we can be healthy. And that is an impetus to change, to get to where they can grow their food. But ultimately, it'll need a huge shift in mentality to shift away from this economy, which is earning your living through a wage. And you can only really earn your living through a wage, or not only, there is still right livelihood, it does exist. Yes. People that are providing genuine service and genuine value, and rewarded for that, and quite rightfully so. But most work is in industry to perpetuate that industry, to keep it going. And it's an extractive industry. It makes its money by extracting resources from the planet and human labor from the planet and turning that into money. And that was very much something that was introduced with colonialism, to see labor and resources as something to turn into money. So it needs us to see that, not only to care about the earth, but realize we've actually been enslaved by Allah, and people lived much better off before this law was put in. So that's where, the imagining works differently on different levels. For the poor, it's reminding them what their grandparents had. It's not that far away. Their grandparents were still fairly self-sufficient, and they can still remember, the mice at home, the grain that was ground, and that memory is still there. So it's to remind them of that and say, this is a lot better than being crammed in the city and suffering. So they can visage the change and make it. And this crisis has highlighted it. And others will it'll need to be more philosophical to realize that we're part of the damage, and now to stop to actually face that and no longer want to be that, and then look for an alternative. So that's the difference. But we have to get back to depending on the land. I mean, true community, a lot of people have remarked that it's brought home our sense of community. People are helping each other, people are communicating and have got time. And because of electronic media, there's still the ability to communicate with each other, even though you're locked down in your home. But the real thing we need to do now is to extend that awareness that the community isn't only with other human beings. We are in community with all life on this planet, and we depend on it for our well-being. Both our physical and our spiritual well-being depends on that relationship. And that can be an impetus to move into the new way, where we are most people are getting back onto the land and regeneratively producing real food that nurtures not only bodies but nurtures souls and minds, that they can be fully alive. And in the process, we recover the earth, in vegetation, permanent vegetation, so natural cycles can start operating again. They have been fractured by this 200 years of severe extractive economy, both in agriculture and in industry.